Hello, everyone. This is Conversations with Rob, now called Fire Breathing Rob. Thanks so much for listening to us on our 10 radio stations all over the country and also on our YouTube podcast, which we're doing now. So thank everyone for that. Let's talk, and we're going to take, this person is taking a break from the campaign trail to speak with us. I'm really fortunate that she is, because she is a fire breather, as I am also on progressive politics. And this is Zina Spezakis. All right, she is over in New Jersey. And we talk about New Jersey a lot as far as climate change. We've spoke about many times on this program about the Green New Deal and how it affects us. AOC has done that in New York, and also Zina has done this in New Jersey. We're going to talk about that throughout the interview. So thanks so much, Zina, for coming on the program. Greatly appreciate the time.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Rob.
All right, so let's get into the thick of things. Your parents were Greek immigrants, and they came here. So you know the immigrant story of basically what Bernie Sanders is telling everybody of his parents being Polish immigrants coming to the country. So can you first talk about the immigrant experience and what you and your family went through and how that affects a lot of immigrants in the immigrant community today?
Well, you know, it's interesting. My parents would tell me stories as a child that both of them dreamt of coming to the United States. I mean, just growing up in Greece right after the war was a very poor country. It went through a civil war. You know, they finally left in the 60s, and it was Greece was under military dictatorship at the time that they left. And, you know, even as children, they always dreamt of coming here. You know, there was this idea that the United States is, you know, land of opportunity. You've rolled up your sleeves, you worked hard, you can make something of yourself. You know, that being said, they landed on these shores. They came here via Canada. And I was actually born in Canada, and I came here as an infant myself. And, you know, my mother was an educated woman. She was a midwife back in Greece. My father was, you know, high school educated, but, you know, both hustled, did odds and ends jobs. My dad, between running a coffee shop, he drove a Zamboni. I had an ice skating rink at one point. My mother cleaned hotel rooms, even though she ran an entire maternity ward in Athens. You know, there was a language barrier, but, you know, you worked hard. You had a good public school system that you can send your children to. And I was fortunate enough to, you know, at the time that I went, I was fortunate enough to go through the New York City public school system, and I took and placed into a science and math high school, which was a public high school, Stuyvesant High School, and you know, just sort of that really lifted me into college and into graduate school. So there was an opportunity, and it was even with a language barrier, there were still opportunities in the 70s, 80s for immigrants.
So let's talk more about you running for Congress. I just wanted to get that question out because, you know, as Donald Trump's been doing throughout his campaigning in 2016, but also during his presidency, he's really been enforcing this anti-immigration message. And I believe, and maybe to end the question after this, and we'll move on to your congressional race, but to end it with this, Trump was playing this immigrant card, white versus against Hispanic, black against Hispanic, all this racist stuff, and it's a lot about immigration. He doesn't talk about the immigrants that overstay their visas a lot. It's mostly about this caravan stuff, as we saw through the 2018 election, that all this caravan stuff, and it's pinned up as immigrants taking the jobs. He also doesn't speak about, when he says this, that the immigrants that are taking jobs, those jobs are jobs that pay $2, $1 an hour picking oranges of where I am in Florida, or also where in California, also in other places. So he doesn't state that. But to just go into that, what is your take on that as far as Trump just pitting people up against each other as far as the immigration debate goes on?
Well, I think Trump is a racist, frankly. I'm not afraid to say that. You know, it's easy to point to, people trying to cross the border. You know, there's a visual of that, right? There's, you know, poor immigrants trying to cross the Rio Grande or whatever to get into the United States. It's less of an optic. I think if you've got folks who travel here on an airplane who overstay their visas, you know, and are not persecuted, it's easier to foment hate and division when you've got something to point to. And frankly, you know, pointing to somebody who overstays their visa is not a very sexy thing. That and the fact that, he got into office, you know, there were a lot of sort of bad economic policies. Frankly, if we had implemented progressive economic policies a decade ago, I don't think we would have elected Donald Trump, because we would have had a stronger economy. We would have had more people working, you know, a fewer people wanting to hate somebody for their misery. And I don't downplay that. You know, it's unfortunate what's happened to a lot of folks, and Donald Trump was there. He was an alternative to the, you know, to the staid politician that they could point to and say, this person's never done anything for me, right? So it's you know, it's a combination, I think, of just racism. It's an easy thing to hate, and also just bad economic policies, very centrist economic policies that don't do anything for the working class over the last decade or two. So,
Zina, you were really successful in business, and I want you to talk about that. So a person that's been so successful in business, why run with all the corruption that's happening in Congress? And we see all these people, and Nancy Pelosi, your opponent's been in there for over 20 some odd, maybe 30 years. I know he got elected in 97, Bill Pascrell, and he's been in there for years. These people don't do anything. They just go against Trump, as what's going on now, and they say anti-Trump, anti-Trump. But when the progressive comes up and has all these policy points, such as you do and other progressives running all over the country, they say, oh, we can't get that done, we can't do that. So why leave the business community and go into this, as Trump says, which is true, this cesspool pond of politics?
Well, that's a good question. I thought I was doing my part, really. I'm an environmental activist as well, and I've got 2 young children, so this is an important issue for me, and it's an environmental justice issue too for a lot of communities. But you know, I thought I was doing my part. I work in clean energy. I was an activist for years, and then I read the UN's IPCC report, which came out about a year and a half ago. And at that time, you know, when you have a collection of the world's best climate scientists telling you you've got about a decade to cut your emissions by about half, you know, you should sit up and notice. And I also study the science through a graduate degree at Johns Hopkins, and every single climate model that I ever looked at has completely overestimated the amount of time in which we have to react. Things are simply accelerating every single time. So that 12 years for me was a lot less. So I looked around and I said, you know, what I'm doing, even though I thought I was part of the solution, is not moving the lever fast enough. And then I looked at my incumbent, who I had voted, you know, loyal Democrat. I go into the voting booth and go tick, tick, tick down the line, Democrat, not really thinking about it. But upon examination of his policies, you know, I see that he takes fossil fuel money. I see that he's taken over $1 million in pharmaceutical and in health insurance money, while parts of our district have the highest uninsured rates in the entire state. He is neglectful of his constituents. He does not return phone calls. He's actually, quite honestly, Rob, it was surprising, he's doing a telephone town hall tonight. The last time he did this, and no disrespect, was when the dinosaurs roamed New Jersey. I mean, he's never had even a telephone town hall. So I think he's feeling the pressure. I left, you know, I could easily just stay in business and just put my head down and not worry about it. But it's my children, it's your children, it's our communities, it is species die-offs, it's environmental justice issues. You know, a lot of these environmental issues, especially here in New Jersey, we've canvassed on thousands of doors in this community. And the issues that we hear are healthcare, racial discrimination, and then also environmental. I mean, I've had people at the door tell me, you know, when it rains, the entire block just floods. And there's no one's doing anything about it. We need to be building resilience, infrastructure into these communities, and that's simply not happening. So not only did Bill Pascrell stay in Congress for the last 25 odd years, but he has done nothing to avoid the climate crisis. And that is, as a mother, that is infuriating. Now, no disrespect to the congressman, he's 83 years old. Perhaps he's not worried about it, but I've got a 6-year-old son and I am worried about it. And so, you know, I had to run because, you know, he was incompetent, inept, and corrupt. That's not what this community deserves. It's certainly not what our children deserve. So that's why I got
Thank you so much for running. We have too many people that just sit in their seats for years upon years upon years. And we definitely need some sort of term limits. Not sure if that'll ever happen, but hopefully it does. I want to talk about, I want to get back to the environment, but since we got into the business talk and you working on Wall Street, can you talk a little bit about, we hear all this stuff from a lot of people that I love, with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, speaking about the corruption on Wall Street. You were in the thick of things and working on Wall Street and knowing all these people. How do they fare to you when you say, I'm for Medicare for all now, I want a Green New Deal? These guys do not want this legislation to pass. So you must be on their hated list. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I am. I probably have lost some friends. I believe in these policies maybe because I'm a compassionate person. Who knows? I don't know. And not to say that most people on Wall Street are not, but frankly, you've got Wall Street is populated by very intelligent, very greedy people for the most part, not everybody. My role, I was a chief operating officer at one of these money managers, and part of my job was a compliance role. And I basically had to put halt on business that was frankly, either too aggressive or was going to put the client at risk. And so I was hated even within the community there because I was the business. I was the stop business department because I had to, we can't push to the edge of illegality and hope that this, hope we don't get audited by the regulators and have it pass. But people come to me and they're like, oh, we can only get this done through incremental means and this, that. And I said, no, I have over 80 million people in this country who are either underinsured or not insured at all. I've got 500,000 people filing for bankruptcies every year. And I've got people, frankly, dying because they're rationing or avoiding healthcare altogether. And if we can find nearly $7 trillion to pay the military-industrial complex for a 19-year war, or over $1 trillion to give corporations and the wealthy tax cuts, then we can certainly find some money to do some of these other programs. So how are you going to pay for it? That is a bogus argument. You can't. When somebody comes to you and argues financial stuff, I shoot back at them with that financial stuff. And, to the benefit of, luckily I have this MBA, and so I understand, and I actually wrote an op-ed a few months ago and appeared in the Star Ledger, which talked about the economics of the whole healthcare industry. Quite honestly, it is a wasteful industry that is ripe for disruption, and it's growing at 5 to 6% every year with no sign of slowing down. We cannot afford our current healthcare system. Medicare for all will save us money, and there's been numerous studies that show that. But
right.
You're not going to get your donations from Big Pharma if you
Right.
if you speak that.
So let's talk about New Jersey more in depth. I want to get into the Trump tax scam first of all. Let's talk about that's really hurt. I'm originally from Rhode Island. I know a lot of people. We do have radio stations in Virginia, up in Massachusetts, we're in Florida too, just a few of the stations. But let's talk about that. A lot of these blue states, East Coast states, they had a lot of, with the Trump tax scam, they lost. They lost a lot of deductions. They lost, they're paying more in tax in the Trump tax scam than they did without it. Can you talk about how that's really affected not just your district, but the whole state of New Jersey in general?
Yeah, the big issue, the big sort of point from that tax reform package was the SALT deduction. New Jersey is a very high real estate tax state. Some parts are more than others, but in general, if you look at the whole state, people pay higher real estate taxes here than probably in the rest of the country. When we do phone banks, the tax issues that we hear are around that. The fact that they took away the deduction for real estate taxes is a big deal. And it's across the board in most of the cities that we call into. Obviously, the wealthy areas are feeling it more, but everybody feels it who is a homeowner here in New Jersey if you're paying north of $10,000 in real estate taxes, which isn't a hard thing to do here in New Jersey. People are frustrated that people understand that, this was cut, other things were cut in order to give, Amazon or whoever, the 1%, these tax cuts, and it's frankly unfair, and there is a feeling here in New Jersey that, New Jersey contributes so much to the federal budget, right, as far as federal income taxes, that we're not seeing that we're not, we're paying into a system that we're getting less out of, and now we're all of a sudden we're getting even less out of that system. So there is that frustration here amongst a lot of folks that we talk to on taxes. That is the big issue here for taxes.
Let's move back into the race. Can you talk about the demographics of the area that you're running in, the cities, black, white, Hispanic, all about that, please?
Yes, so it's a very socioeconomically diverse district. It's been gerrymandered. It's also a very ethnically diverse district where there are, it has Paterson, New Jersey, which is the third largest city in New Jersey. And we have, we knocked on doors in Paterson first, and there were neighborhoods that were majority communities of color, whether they were African American or Latino. We knocked on plenty of doors where we had to have Spanish translators with us. And a funny note on this, Rob, there are an enormous amount of Bernie Sanders supporters in the district here. It's actually kind of funny. Yeah, a lot of progressives. But it's very diverse. I mean, you've got a neighborhood that might have a $5 million home, and you've got people living in extreme poverty. So it is across the board. But there are large pockets of progressivism in the district.
So how do you feel the campaign is going so far? I know you said there's a lot of Sanders supporters, which, does well for you more than Bill Pascrell who's taken money, as you said, from oil companies. And I know he stood up against AOC and the Medicare for All. They didn't even want to have the vote on that. But that's another story for another day. So is that pretty, you're getting that good reception rather? We're
getting a great reception. And in fact, our campaign has been so successful and so aggressive that there are the New Jersey Democratic chairs across the counties here in the state, the establishment basically, are trying to rig the ballot so that progressives are not as successful. There are I think there's 5 or 6 incumbents that are being challenged by progressives, me being one of them. And, Pascrell has, the way I should context this, New Jersey is its own set of political corruption. In fact, when I first started running, I was warned by political consultants, New Jersey is the most corrupt state in the union, and I believe it. There's a reason why organized crime, had its beginnings here. Basically, the Democratic chairs control the real estate on the ballot. So when you walk into the voting booth, they control the prime real estate. And in that prime real estate, they place the people that they want, Bill Pascrell, Cory Booker, whoever else, the centrist Democratic presidential candidate. Now, what's happening in the national politics is affecting what's going to happen here. Bernie Sanders is enormously popular in the state of New Jersey. He's enormously popular nationally, but in the state of New Jersey, a lot, much more so, I think. And that combined with the fact that there is no strong sort of centrist establishment candidate, that they're trying to basically decapitate the lines on the ballot. So I'm going to try not to get too technical. So the establishment would want like a Biden, a Booker, a Pascrell on that line in their it's on the Fifth Avenue of the ballot, the prime real estate. On another line would be a Sanders, a Larry Ham, who's running for Senate here under Sanders, and myself, right? Now, potentially that would be a line as well. They know that if we bracket with Senator Sanders, that we've won, because that's how popular progressives have become in this state. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to cut trying to have an open primary for the presidential line, but keep the corrupt line for the down ballot candidates. Now, that's been part of the reason that's happened is because, we've been endorsed by Our Revolution, Brand New Congress, all these sunrise hubs, we're making noise and we're knocking on doors. We've got dozens, if over 100 volunteers at this point who are knocking on doors, making phone calls, working on the campaign, and there's an enormous amount of energy. So there is a high probability that if we stay with Senator Sanders that, Bill Pascrell goes away. Now, they don't want that because I'm not going to pay them. Bill Pascrell cuts checks to the Bergen County Democrats. I don't, so, I work for the people, not for them. So.
Well, I want to ask you this question since you got into that. We interviewed Kimberly Graham. She's running for Senate under Brand New Congress over in Iowa. And she said that it cost her $60,000 to get the voter list by the Iowa Democratic Party. Now, are you feeling that same thing where they're making you pay like an obscene amount of money for a voter list?
Yep. No, that's exactly it. In fact, if you're running as a Democrat, you should get a license to the database, basically, that provides the voter information. They declined to give us a license, and so we had to pay out of pocket to get those voter rolls for the year that we're running in. It was in excess of $6,000 we had to pay just to get those voter rolls. But without that, you're not able to have a field operation. So it was kind of a critical piece. And so we're like, we're not going to pay for merchandise. We're not going to pay for buttons, but we will pay for this voter, for this database. So it was important.
Right.
But yeah,
it's a shame that they're doing that. But that's what it is. And this is the thing that gets me, and we'll move on after this. But, they do this to Sanders supporters. They're doing this to progressives in general, people that are running in the progressive line, as you stated. And if they think that they're going to cheat people like you and Bernie Sanders out of legitimate wins and think they can put up Blumenberg or Biden or Pete Buttigieg, they'll get slaughtered in November. They'll lose the House. They'll lose the seats that are up in the Senate, and they'll lose the presidency by a lot. So they can do whatever they want. But I don't even think they care, because we've seen people on MSNBC, Donnie Deutsch, who's a Clinton stooge on Morning Joe, said he would rather vote for Donald Trump than vote for Bernie Sanders. So I agree with you 100% that they're ruining the Democratic Party on their own way.
Yeah, they're talk about party unity, right? When you hear comments like that, look, I mean, progressives have the wind to their backs. No other. I mean, I was phone banking for Bernie Sanders last night. I mean, we get together. We all know each other. We're all constantly working on campaigns, whether it's mine, and I've got a lot of Bernie Sanders volunteers come over to my campaign and canvass with us. But he's got millions of volunteers. His support is crazy big, and he's got a very organized operation that should not be downplayed. He has executed really well in building this organization, and and he's coalition building. And people just appreciate the fact that he will drop truth bombs on any topic that you want. He's not, he's going to be truthful. He's going to be consistent, even when it's not politically expedient. And people appreciate that, and people trust him. I know I do, and that's why I endorsed him. So.
Great. I'm happy to hear that. And he needs more people like you running and winning, hopefully. So let's talk about what you're seeing on the ground. I know you said the campaign's getting a great reception, rather. Do you feel like, and you talked about this a little bit in the voting aspect, that they're trying to screw progressives already in New Jersey? And I know your primary is it June 9th? Is that correct?
June 2nd.
June 2nd. I'm sorry about that. So you have a little time, to keep campaigning and stuff like that. But with the rigging already in your race, and the rigging we've seen in Iowa and other places already in the Democratic presidential campaign, are you worried about this stuff going on right now in the campaign as far as your race?
I mean, I think about it, of course, but I'm not going to. I worry about it for like a second, then I figure out solutions around it, frankly. It energizes me and energizes my staff. We get angry about it, and we use that anger to come up with better strategies. I mean, look, we have to run a campaign like they're going to do the absolute worst to us. We're running under that strategy. And if even they are trying to screw us, but we have an enormous amount of support. We have a very strong field operation. We're asking voters to earn their vote. We don't assume that we're going to have it simply because, hey, okay, I've got Medicare for all, and I believe in Green New Deal jobs and a $15 minimum wage. You need to go to the doors and ask people about it. And so, whether it's going to a community, to a mosque or a synagogue or a church, or even just canvassing, you have to ask people for the vote. And, every time they do something like this, it gets us even more energized. It's actually kind of funny. I'm surprised that the mayor of Paterson, which is a large city in my district, came out and endorsed Bloomberg about a week and a half ago. And I don't think he would have endorsed Bloomberg if he didn't have the blessing of Pascrell and of the county chairs. Because Pascrell, I don't think, is going to come out and endorse anybody. His behavior is not such that he makes a lot of noise. I think he subscribes to the policy of the politician who does nothing wrong, sort of thing. I mean, he really does. But it's we just get more energized every time they throw this at us. I'm like, you think this is going to stop me? Then you really don't know who I am.
Not has he committed, Zina, to any debate with you yet?
Well,
I'm
not
sure
for
not.
not for lack of trying for my campaign manager. I mean, at some point we're going to have to just go down there and ask him in person. He has not. He has not. And it's I think he saw what happened to Joe Crowley with AOC, even though it was about a 15-minute on-air debate, but she eviscerated him. And he has such a bad history of voting the wrong. He voted for Blue Lives Matter. He's voted against women's rights to choose. He's voted against Medicare. I mean, all this stuff. I can't. I'm trying to find a piece of legislation that he does well. He votes for commemorative coin acts. There's nothing controversial about something like that. But we would, and I come armed with the facts. I've gone to school. I know how to do research, and I'm just going to go in there and ask him. In fact, I've asked him on social media whether he's planning on returning the blood money or the legalized bribes, as I call them, while his community is suffering. Yeah. Silence.
Well, Zina, isn't it funny that the Republicans always talk about the Democrats, rather, the establishment, talk about how the Republicans are taking away the vote, and they are, with the voter ID and the voter suppression. But the Democrats, the establishment, are doing the same thing as far as stuff they do, and it might be little kind of tiny things compared to what the Republicans are doing, but they're still doing the same thing, such they're doing in your race, such they're doing with the Iowa app. So they're just as sneaky as the Republicans with all their voter intimidation apps. Apps and stuff they do in general. So it's just pretty sad. But I want to finish off with the last couple of questions. As far as the district, we saw in 2018, and we see right now in 2020 that healthcare is the big, vote leader as far as issues that people care about. Is that the most important issue? I know you spoke about tax reform also, but is that what you're mostly hearing as far as New Jersey?
At the door, we're hearing, so the questions that we get at the door are on healthcare, on the environment, i.e., but sort of the resiliency part of of the climate crisis. How are we going to help these communities? And then thirdly, we're hearing a lot about decriminalizing the police, actually, within Paterson. We've gotten a bunch of questions on that, which has been surprising. There is a lot of criminal justice work that needs to be done in this community. At least that's what we've heard at the door. So those are the big three issues, and they're all progressive issues.
Well, do you feel like Phil Murphy's done a good job? I've heard some mixed reviews on him. I know he's used to work at Goldman Sachs in the past. So I was a little worried about that, him being from the financial sector. But, New Jersey's right next to New York, so I see that. But we see Hurricane Sandy in 2012 happen, and that was a big catastrophe in New Jersey. So how do you feel about Phil Murphy's job?
Well, so far, I'm looking I'm looking at what he's doing on the environment. He's come out with, his own climate policy, which is much more aggressive than Christie's, which was, almost non-existent. So that's not really a level comparison. But there is, just last month or the month before, he came out and said, let's double the amount of, I'll give you an example of wind energy. New Jersey has geographically has been blessed with some good offshore wind resources. I won't get into the technical details on that. But, we're even doubling that, but we're not coming close to meeting the energy demands of the state with renewables. So I feel that we need to be much more aggressive. This is a day one issue for me when I get to Congress. And it is, and we still get half of our energy from nuclear. We have an enormous amount that comes from natural gas. Very little comes from renewables. California has done a great job in incentivizing the transition to renewables, whether it's been through their building codes or financial incentives or anything like that. That's the type of stuff that New Jersey needs to be doing. We need to increase the tax credit for cars. We need to incentivize getting rooftop solar. We need to be much more aggressive. We're not nearly doing as much as we could. And we need to be enormously much more aggressive in installing offshore wind, because New Jersey's got some good offshore wind resources, and we need to be plugging those in. Now, part of that, I'll tell you, Rob, is the fact that even if you do bring these offshore wind sources onshore, you have a lot of infrastructure work that you need to do in order to handle the amount of power that's coming in too. So it gets very technical. I hope he goes much more aggressive than what he is right now, but it's been a good start. It's better than Christie's. So.
All right. Lastly, where can people find more about your campaign if they want to donate? Do you have text banking or phone banking, even if they're from a different state? As I said, we're from all over the place with 10 radio stations.
We do. Yeah, you can volunteer or contribute to our campaign at our website, which is zinaforcongress.com. That's spelled ZINAFOR congress.com. And yeah, we're always looking for volunteers. We're going to be, our phone banks are getting bigger and bigger. So those are a lot of fun. If you can get a group of people together, it's like a party, actually. It's kind of fun to have a phone bank together. So we would love the support.
Zina, what I like about you is that you've worked in business, you worked in the financial sector, so you know what's going on in their minds and you know how to beat people like that. So I like that. And obviously I love your platform. So Zina, and I'm going to try, I hope I don't botch your last name, Zina Spezakis.
Got it. Yeah.
All right.
You got
Zina
it. Thanks,
Spezakis,
Rob.
Thanks so much for coming on the program. And hopefully you'll get that big W. We need you in New Jersey. We need more progressives all over the country. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on, Rob.